Hi there, everyone. Welcome back to Careers at the End of the World. I'm Jenn Walker Wall, founder of Work Wonders Careers and, of course, host of Careers at the End of the World. And I am bringing to you the last episode of the summer, assuming we know that as soon as it's after Labor Day, it is fall, even if not technically. Spiritually, it will be fall, and I am finding myself really grateful that issuing these weekly episodes, which was really like a frantic effort to catch up for a couple months where I just totally got off track, has really generated a lot of interest and engagement around the podcast. And I fear that I have set myself up for a pace that I really can't maintain. So I want to thank everyone who has listened to the podcast, who's shared the podcast, who's written me about the podcast. I really, really, really appreciate it. And we're going to be doing a little sabbatical. I take a vacation at the end of August, and I will be doing that this year. And we'll be back next month with new episodes. And I'm really excited to share a little bit more about what I've been up to behind the scenes this summer. And we'll have some cool things to talk about and share with you. And I'm looking forward to that. But that probably won't happen until a week or so after Labor Day. So keep an eye out. We've got an archive of episodes, so make sure you check those out. And I hope I hope you enjoy the rest of your summer too. I hope you haven't been job searching, working at full throttle. If you haven't taken any time off yet, I hope you do so. I've been having a conversation with clients that's become pretty prominent in the last 6 months. And this is about career stability. And I do think it's a direct response to the volume of layoffs and the tough job market we've had for, 18 months or so at this point. So a lot of people are coming to me and really looking for the career thing that will be stable, that will not change, that they can count on and rely on. And they're putting a lot of pressure on themselves to figure that out. And I even see some other career coaches using language like future-proof your career with these tips. And when I see that, I always think a little bit, that feels a little bit out of the scope of a career coach to me. So many of those tips put so much pressure on you to sort of like ingratiate yourself potentially with leadership and management, to invest a lot of money and time and resources into your own continual development. And it kind of ignores the rapid changes that are really beyond our control in ways that I don't think we can always predict or see. 10 years ago, you might have thought to yourself or had friends and family think like, I'll go be a nurse. Right? Everyone always needs nurses. I mean, largely that's true. But I think of where we are at this point with COVID and everything. And I think that experience of being a nurse or any kind of medical professional or public health professional, that experience has changed so much. I think about the people I know who are DE&I professionals, some of whom moved to places like Florida and Texas. I don't know that they would have anticipated 10 years ago that their line of work would be practically barred, almost illegal, taken out of universities where so many of them were. And that's to say nothing, right, of like technology and AI and what impact those will have on people's jobs. And while we can kind of speculate a little bit, there's always going to be things we don't know. And I wish we could have that conversation a little bit more, because my guess is that's the space that most people will be trying to navigate in, is in a situation they couldn't have predicted. So because predicting the future is something I consider outside the scope of my career consulting work, I wanted to distill a clearer question and share some perspectives on that, some of which I use personally, in case they're helpful ways to kind of reframe this question. When I hear people looking for stability, I think what they're talking about is income, okay? That's a really helpful, useful distinction. Like, yes, they're talking about work, but work as a means to income. The vast majority of my clients, and myself included, generally speaking, bring a lot of privilege to this process and experience, right? So I think it's atypical for people who consider themselves middle class, upper middle class to be talking about income. I think we don't do that. But that's what I think this conversation is really about, is how do I avoid months of time where I am not generating income, or maybe you have unemployment or some kind of severance, but there's financial stress there for a lot of people. And we tend to not really talk directly about that for a lot of reasons. So I want to talk a little bit about what I think is helpful in terms of creating some stability around income as a professional. I'm talking about this a little bit from my own experience as a small business owner and a portfolio careerist, and ways that I ensure that business continues to come, right? That's something I think about pretty regularly. And also talk a little bit about how I've worked with clients to help them understand what their options are if they're worried about what their job or job prospects look like in a field where they train to be. And I am looking at my notes here, and I have about five categories of things that I think might be helpful to consider if this is something that's on your mind. The first thing that I think about when it comes to maintaining stability in terms of income and revenue is flexibility. Being able to offer and position yourself strongly for more than one type of work or role, in my view, is advantageous. I like to think of it as having different levers to pull. Now, I like being able to pull different levers and different sort of areas of expertise or interest that I've developed over the years. That's fun for me. I think it can be pretty stressful to people who just want one thing to do. But having some flexibility allows for the opportunity of new channels, different channels of potential income and revenue. So when I started working in this business full time, I was adjunct teaching in a sociology department. And so that took advantage of the fact I had a master's degree in sociology and allowed me to build the practice that I have today. And while coaching and teaching college level sociology actually do have some things in common, they're really drawing from different parts of my experience in many ways that gave me some breadth, some flexibility in terms of how I could earn income as I was shifting into self-employment and a portfolio style career. Most recently, I have been consulting fully in the career space, and I've been coaching folks, and I've been working on curriculum and better leveraging some skills I've honed and developed in the last 10 years through my own business. I've also done things like consult with business owners on surveys they were sending out for market research. If I were to consider going back into work full time, I don't know exactly what I would focus on, but I know I'd have multiple options. I know there's different things I could do. I could be in the career space pretty solidly. I could be in the teaching and learning space pretty solidly. I could really position myself in a variety of ways so that if I needed a job or needed income, there's different levers I could pull. One thing having a portfolio style career where there's a big umbrella that's basically your job, but it includes things like self-employment income, 1099 income, maybe W-2 income sometimes, is that you don't get quite as attached to a job title. I'm not that attached to what people call me. I try to be clear when I'm marketing my business so people know what I'm doing, but it's less I don't walk around, thinking I only do this one thing. And it really encourages you to think more in terms of your interests and skills and where you can add value, where you can contribute. And I think folks who are fully immersed, right, in the full-time in-house working world become a job title. And the degree to which you can push against that, at least in your own head a little bit, and try to really think about what your experience is and that would be useful and valuable in other domains, the more flexibility you'll create for yourself. The second category that's really helpful that will help you maintain income are relationships. There's probably no bigger driver in my work arrangement currently than relationships. Former clients and other career coaches, people I consider peers, but who work in often kind of adjacent type of coaching content, like leadership coaching or something like that, are my biggest sources of revenue. They also help facilitate a lot of partnerships that build visibility. The ecosystem that I developed, invested time in, and continue to do so it's really one of my favorite parts of working for myself. When you're self-employed and you're working on your marketing ecosystem, like, you get to pick your coworkers. And I didn't really think about that before because I actually always had good coworkers that I enjoyed for the most part. But it's very cool. I get to work with very cool people, largely of my own choosing, every day. And there's a lot of creativity from that. There's a lot of reciprocity that comes from that. I love referring people elsewhere and sharing my colleagues' work. So investing time in relationships is going to be useful to you. It's going to be valuable. And it's one of those things that's really hard to make time for. And if you haven't done it or you're not used to doing it, it's not a muscle, it's not a muscle that you are flexing and using all that often. This is going to be some work, but I can tell you 10 years into this, like, it's extremely valuable to me. I had a session this week with someone who said she'd been on my mailing list for years. I still get referrals from the very first partnership I ever did, which was Tech Ladies. It's just, it's stuff worth doing because it pays off. And because it is stuff that pays off, but not necessarily instantaneously, it can be a little slow going at first. But when you genuinely find people that you like, who you value, and that feel that way about you, it really unlocks a lot of doors. I get a lot of opportunities passed to me because of the friends and contacts and clients I've had in the last 10 years. So I really want to encourage you to invest time and energy in building a professional ecosystem that's going to support your growth in the short and long term. And don't be afraid to wait for the long term. The third category I will refer to as skills, but I want to complicate skills a little bit. Of course, reskilling or just being skilled, knowing your skills, having those skills, maintaining those skills, that is very important for most professionals in the current context, much less in a rapidly changing landscape around work. I do think it's worth it to think about what the threats might be to your current skill set. And I'll continue to use myself as an example. It's pretty easy to have AI generate resumes and cover letters, and even to help you prepare for interviews. Even though I don't think they produce results nearly as good as mine, I'm not worried about AI doing a quality job like I do. But I can see totally why, if you didn't have the budget for coaching, you would use these tools. Or if you are my client using these tools, you know what you're doing and you know how to use these tools to get the best possible result in the least amount of time. That I can really appreciate. AI was actually one of those things that really helped me lean in to the rebrand of the business we did earlier this year. And I think you'll see in some programming shifts that we have coming up, incorporating other things into our services and community, and going through a little bit of a rebrand where the focus is really on the transformation, the execution and the transformation of the process, which are things AI really don't help you with, right? They help you with the nuts and bolts pieces, and leaning into the other pieces that people really, really struggle with. It's very reasonable that emerging technology will change the way most of us work. I mean, I'm not even working the way I was 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So there's things we know and there's things we don't know. And what I do know is that there's tons of AI tools to help you with your resume and your job search. But there's things that those things also don't provide. And making sure that our marketing was really reflective of that became increasingly important to me. Is there a known threat to the way you're currently operating? And it doesn't have to be just technology. I've worked with public health professionals who are really burned out by a pandemic that really never ended. I've worked with DEI professionals in higher education who can't do that job anymore because it's not allowed to exist. So there are like political and social implications for people's work currently and also in the future, I assume. So when I think about the skills piece, I think about what is the known threat? We can't know all the unknown threats, but what are the known threats that we can think through? And what kind of skills do we need to emphasize or further develop in order to remain competitive in what might be a tighter or smaller market? The other skill I think about a lot, and this applies to people who are self-employed, portfolio careerists, job seekers, is the skill of getting work. I've said this before, but owning a small business is a lot like job searching constantly. You have to be generating interaction and visibility and adding value constantly. And if you're someone who really struggles with the job search, maybe you stay in jobs for a really long time, maybe you've just kind of gotten things handed to you, which I think is actually great. I love it when people get jobs through their network, but maybe you don't have a lot of familiarity with like making an ask or using your resume, and you want to be able to activate those channels and not wait until your network shows up with something that's a perfect fit for you. Those are also skills you can learn. You can learn to be more creative in the way you position yourself, in the way you show up, in the way you solicit work opportunities. Any small business owner, I think, will tell you that owning a business is like a master class in figuring that out. I would like to say really quickly, but I don't think I figured it out really quickly. It took a lot of time and a lot of experimentation to figure out how and where to show up consistently. And it takes practice. It takes skill. It's not really an accident. It's an intention, it's a strategy. And if you don't know how to manage your career, if you don't know how to ask for business or generate business, you can learn. Now, these last two are probably going to be a little bit out of left field. I bet you're not going to see them coming. I'm going to say them anyways. Maintain stability in work and income and your ability to consistently be able to generate those things for yourself is going to be avoiding long COVID. Since 2020, I have not given a webinar or, had a month without consults that didn't include someone who became chronically ill after getting COVID. Pretending COVID is over is so wildly irresponsible to me on a policy level. But on a professional level, it's actually just bordering on absurd. I talk to people every month at least who are needing to find some kind of work situation that's going to allow them to work remote, that's going to allow them to work part-time. They're having to renegotiate their career with long COVID and whatever complications that brought with it. And because often what people experience as part of long COVID is extreme fatigue, that's really hard to do. It's really hard to do, okay? It's a really tough endeavor that requires a lot of time, because what we don't have going for us is like a lot of energy to dump into this project at once. I can't tell you the ways I've seen long COVID derail people's careers. And when I say careers, I mean income, okay? I mean healthcare, insurance, benefits. I work with a lot of people who have chronic health issues that we need to be mindful of as we think about both their process and the end result. We are not responsible for the chronic health illnesses we have. It doesn't mean we did anything wrong. There's not much you can do to avoid it on a personal level, but I do really want to encourage people to resist this idea that COVID is over and to really pay attention to the data and research that's emerging on COVID. I have enough issues. I have enough health issues. I've been going out of my way for 4 years to not catch it, and I will continue to do so, because the possibility of not being able to work for months at a time would derail a good portion of my life. Thinking about stability and work, I think we should not ignore what's right in front of us, right? Like what is going on presently that we're largely being asked to ignore, despite the fact that the research shows pretty clearly there's a lot of long-term impacts potentially, and that those chances increase the more times we get COVID. So because I value my income, I mask at the grocery store. I definitely mask at the hospital. I mask pretty much everywhere I go in public. We can't prevent any potential health issues from cropping up for us. We may not even be able to fully prevent COVID if we're leaving our house. But minimizing exposure as much as possible is really important. Another piece of this that's very important is I do see COVID as a labor issue. And so when I go into a grocery store or I go into any place where there's workers, service workers, I want to minimize exposure to them as well. So I know that's not really where the majority opinion is on COVID right now, but that's where mine is. And I have seen it devastate people's careers. And I feel like career is a terrible euphemism here because really what it's done is completely devastate and rearrange their lives in really, really challenging ways. I think that's something we need to really think about. It could be us. It could be a partner. It could be a friend. Maybe it's no one we know. Maybe it won't happen to us, but it could. And so minimizing that exposure is part of my career stability plan to not be any sicker than my baseline. I have one more category of things that I think has been really helpful to me that I will share. And it's a broad category, but I think if you know, you know. I'm going to say astrology / witchcraft / magic have been really helpful. And I want to be super clear about why. I have been following the astrology of 2024 for a couple of years, just really as someone with a vested interest in what life might be like in this country. I used the astrology of the year to plan a lot of my work. I knew from astrology, and just to be clear, like I'm not doing the astrology myself. I'm just reading from other astrologers who are much better at sort of thinking about world events, more traditional astrology, you might say. I planned my workload around when I thought would be the best time to show up and be visible. And even though I had some personal hiccups that like didn't align perfectly with all of that, that was really a good move. I knew when I wouldn't be able to compete with some energy that was just too chaotic. I have a sense of that for the end of the year as well. And so that's been just really, really helpful. I knew that like May and June were going to be like the calmest months of the year. I hate to say that. Sorry. I'm just telling you what I heard from the astrologers. And actually May, June, and July were really great months for me. And actually August is going to be too, but really because I set myself up for success in May and June. So not putting too much pressure on me. You can also use your personal astrology to look at this. And I do that. I can more or less do that for myself. But really looking at the astrology for the country and getting a good sense of that has been truly, truly helpful. So when you see people, if you have astrologers that you've been following for a while, you can listen to those reports and start to get a sense of like, okay, here's what to expect. Like this summer with all the election stuff going on, do I like it? Do I like all these ups and downs? And like, generally no, but I knew it was coming. So I felt like prepared and I think a little bit more chill than 2020 election Jen was doing at the time. So I pay a lot of attention to astrology to plan and execute my work. That's been really, really tremendously helpful. The reason I just want to say shout out to witchcraft and spirituality, maybe it's not witchcraft for you, but a lot of my conversations, especially with self-employed people this year who are job searching, is just this like overwhelming sense of doom. Like business has slowed down for a lot of self-employed people. Obviously, there's lots of layoffs. And that is such a hard energy to bring into a process you want to transform your life and career for the better. It's hard enough to job search and build a business when you're like full of optimism. You still run into challenges. And so to feel like you've lost everything that you have worked hard to build, to feel like, you've turned a corner, you're not going to get around, that things are really crumbling is such a hard energy to transmute. And for me, That's where all this other stuff really, really comes in. And like astrology reminds me like, sometimes we just have to have this energy. Sometimes this is just what's being provided to you. But it also reminds me of like cycles and periods of release and periods of action, periods of rest. And I think it's helped me rethink my own expectations for some of this work. I think I've actually talked about this here before, but the question I often ask my cards when that doom feeling is just like creeping in, whether it's a personal, professional, or political level, is like, what am I not paying attention to here that I should be paying attention to? And when I ask that question, I get really helpful, less doomy feedback, right? Like it really helps me energetically. I think therapy could be good for this. I think yoga could be good for this, or maybe any kind of movement, because it is so present and heavy, and there's evidence that things aren't going well, and it is hard to be optimistic. You really have to work hard to transmute the doom and gloom. I'll link to the podcast episode I did where I shared some of these things I do in detail, but you know, I do a lot, and it's made a big difference in helping me think through challenging times. I'm just looking, as I'm recording, I'm looking at the corner of my desk. I have a success altar on my desk, and with it I have like I have crystals, I have oils, I have elixirs, I have sprays, I have my candle, I have an oracle card. You know, I just have a lot going on here. Honestly, I need it. It's really, really helped. It's really helped. So finding a way to, in a healthy way, work through any doom and gloom feelings that you might have, which are so legitimate and valid. So feel your feelings. This is not a way to avoid that. But if you reach a point where it's time to do something about that, I think it's really helpful to think, what else can this energy be? How can this energy serve me better? I think a lot about personal power and reclaiming personal power, even if it feels like the odds are really stacked against you, and finding opportunities to exercise autonomy and power, and also to occasionally accept defeat, but get back up again. That's really just what needs to be done in many cases. And it's a very, very hard thing to do. It's hard. I watch it be hard in people. I've had moments where it was really, really hard. So that's the fifth category. Astrology, witchcraft, whatever sort of spiritual seasonal practices you may have might be really helpful here. One thing I often say to my clients who are job searching is, I've never seen anyone fail who keeps going. I see people stop job searching. And sometimes, and most of the time, that has nothing to do with failure. Sometimes their toxic boss gets a new job. Sometimes they get a promotion. Sometimes something happens at work that makes staying useful. But I kind of feel similarly about stability. If you're in an unstable period, that doesn't mean that's where you'll stay. That's a season, or it can be a season. What will be most useful for most people looking to maintain continuity in their income in the years to come is going to be about maximizing your skills and your strength, and also your relationships. Being in community with people who are sharing opportunities, sharing resources, and supporting each other. It makes me really sad to think that future-proofing, so to speak, your career, it's a very reductive way to think about it. And it tells you once again, you're on your own. Do these things or perish. Even though we know that the very wealthy in this country and on this planet are not making strategic, rational decisions, have way more than their fair share of power, influence, and money. I just don't know. I actually don't know that I can, with integrity, tell people I know how to future-proof their career. But because I don't come from generational wealth, and because I am self-employed, I'm pretty good at creating income and stability there. It's worth it to spend less time obsessing over training and more time invested in assessing what makes the most sense for you and the people around you and the relationships around you. Really understanding how and where you might be able to use your skills to add value And getting good at communicating that over and over and over again is going to be really, really helpful for most people. I feel like these 5 things have legs. I think these things can work at scale for a lot of people. And it may not mean every month is a killer month, but that's also not what income stability means to me. I don't think that's even what people are asking for, right? You want to be able to support yourself as best you can in the season you're in. Thinking about that might be a more helpful question and reframe for many people. All right, I am off to enjoy my summer vacation. I hope the rest of your summer and your Labor Day is restful and restorative. And if you missed this podcast, please go back and listen to our archives. We have plenty here. I would love to hear from you if you have other thoughts on career and income stability. I'm really excited to come back in September because I'll have some things to share. I'll have some updates, some invitations, and I'm really looking forward to that. It should be, it should be a good fall. It's going to be chaotic, but there's some things to look forward to in the chaos. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate all of you who are listening and sharing and letting me know. I can't wait to come back in September. I'll talk to you then. Take care.